So I see another question here. I will be starting a graduate program this fall after not being in school for over 14 years. What advice would you give me so that I can effectively manage my time? That's a really great question, Wood and Whimsy Handmade. I love that question because it's so important. Well, first off, congratulations to getting into graduate school after this time period. That's a big feat, and you should be really proud of yourself. One thing I would suggest, or some advice in terms of managing your time, is to take inventory on all the things that you need to do. I don't know if you have a family or a spouse, or you need to take care of other people, or if you're just by yourself, but you might already have responsibilities that you should take inventory of. So let's give the example that you have children, and you know that you have to get the children ready for morning to go to school. You also need to pick them up. That's something that you did before you got into school. So now that you're in school, you have to think about, am I going to be still picking up the children, or is that a task that I could delegate? So that is something that you might want to consider, is what are things that you can delegate, and what are things that you still need to do for yourself. One thing when I talk about inventory, take the inventory of the things you need to do, but also take the inventory of your hours. So write down every single hour in a day and put in the times that are non-negotiable. So say, for example, using the example of taking the children to school, if no matter what you need to pick up the kids and bring them to school, then you would block out that time and say from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., I have to take care of the kids. And then say, for example, you have a job and you work part-time. And so, from 9:30 a.m. to 3 p.m., you're at your part-time job. And then from 4 p.m. to, say, 8 p.m., you're at school. So now that you've put in these kind of non-negotiables, you could go in and say, all right, now let me see what times do I have actually open. So taking away time that you need to sleep, taking away time you need to eat, the time to pick up the kids, the time to go to work, and the time to go to school. Now you can see what times you actually have available to finish tasks. So then you could tell yourself that, all right, I have a total of 3 hours in this day where I can actually complete tasks that I have to do for school. And then you would actually put in those times and work on the task. Additionally, another thing I would suggest is start putting in your boundaries now. Tell your family and your friends, hey, I am going back to school. I will not be checking my email before a certain time, or I won't be answering the phone. And start kind of putting in these boundaries now, so that when you get into school and you need to study and you're in class, people aren't bugging you. They need to get used to you being in a different type of schedule. Another thing I would suggest is take advantage of the programs and opportunities that you have at school. There may be times within your school hours that you can use. So if you know you're in school from 4 to 8 p.m. and every day the Graduate Center has study hours, take advantage of that and go to that type of program and use that to, say, do your homework, to write your essays, to apply for jobs, whatever it might be. So those are just some tips that I would just think of if I was returning back to school. And just also another side note is that something I have noticed for myself, I haven't taken a break like that, but I did go back to school, and I was not the oldest, but not the youngest. But something I have noticed, that the people who go back to school always work the hardest. And so keep that in mind. Like, you're going to work hard, and you're coming in there with a purpose. You now have a better and clearer idea of why you're going back to school. But don't let that not let you hang out with people, join a club, become a president of a club, or whatever it may be. Okay, so I see another question here. Do I have a favorite planner? I love Baron Fig. That's my go-to company. I love the quality of the materials. I love that they plant trees for buying their Confidant notebooks. And I also love that they're based in New York and they are worker owned. I really enjoy the planner. It's blank, and so I can customize it to however I like and for what works for me. They do have other types of planners. If you go to Lima P Co on Instagram, Lima PEACO. I have some guides on stationery that I like, and I have Baron Fig on there as well. I also like the Passion Planner. That's a planner that I used to use, and it's really good for people who just want to be completely analog and not use any digital tools. So that's a planner that I recommend. I also recommend using the bullet journal method or some form of it. If you are just using a planner, it gets really helpful. So another question I see here, do you schedule in sleep and food? Yes, I do. Um, I'm not, it depends how, I'm not as strict as I used to be. While I was in school, I was a little bit more strict because I had a lot I needed to do. But that is something that I would do. When I talked about the time blocking, which is a technique and method that I really like and I really recommend, is that I start from when I'm going to be sleeping and then I work my way backwards. Or actually, I start from when I want to wake up and then work my way backwards. So if I know I want to wake up at 6 a.m. and I sleep like a baby, I need like my 8 hours of sleep. So if I want to wake up at 6 a.m., that means I need to be in bed, eyes closed, lights shut by like 10 p.m. So I would block out that time. And so that's what I do when it comes for sleep. And then from there, I see how many other hours I actually have available. When it comes to food, I'm not as strict, but since working from home, I have put in my schedule when I'm gonna take lunch, just to create that kind of boundary at work. For I'm off the calendar, I'm not available, so I will schedule in lunch, dinner, maybe not so much. But if I am thinking I'm going to bed at 10 p.m., I try not to eat too close to bed, so I'm probably going to be eating around like 7 p.m., 6 p.m. or so. But not all the time I schedule in food. So another question here is, would you recommend taking notes on a, you didn't finish the sentence. So I take note, if you could finish the sentence, that would be helpful, but I'll just talk about like notes in general. I take notes in my notebook. I like to write things down, but I also have an app that I use called Standard Notes, and I write down my notes there too. Okay, so the question is, would you recommend taking notes on a laptop or writing your notes in a notebook? If you take notes on a laptop, is there a specific way you organize the notes in your computer? Um, so I think it just depends on you as a person. Um, there are studies that say that people who take notes on the laptop don't retain the information as much, but I'm not sure how true that is. I do both. I take notes in a notebook, and I use the app that I mentioned, Standard Notes. And Standard Notes is where I capture quick thoughts. When I was in school, I used Microsoft OneNote. And I started to use Microsoft OneNote because it was already in my computer. So the Microsoft OneNote, you could make things like a binder and a notebook. And so I had a different notebook for every class. And so for the class, I would separate out the notebook. So if you're taking notes on a laptop, I would suggest using some kind of tool. I see in the chat, Izumi Fowler put Evernote that she uses. I have used Evernote in the past, but like I mentioned, I ended up using OneNote because it was on my computer, it already came installed with my software. If you're going to use digital notes, I would say figure out a method that works for you. How do you think? So I think kind of like broad and then I go narrow. So for me, how I would set up a digital notebook is that I would probably separate it out into the courses or semesters. And then within each semester, I'd have different sections. And so each section would be its own class or whatever the thing is. And then I would have the notes as like a tab. So notes for each class, put the date on it, the time, whatever you need to do that. I don't know about Evernote, but for OneNote, you could hyperlink into documents. So you might want to do that as well. If you're using a notebook, I would use, for me, I use a different notebook for every class, and every notebook has a folder. I like to color orient things. So my notebook and my my folders, they match. I also did not mention this before, but also my calendar and my task manager, the colors match. So every color that I have has a meaning. And so I could quickly look at my calendar and see green and know, okay, green means health, wellness. I see blue. Blue means social. Yellow means personal projects. And purple means work or whatever, however I set it up. And so then when I look at my task manager, I put those same colors and it helps me just quickly like be able to look at things. The thing that I always say, like when you ask these questions, which should I use, which should I not use, it really is trial and error. And so I came up with this system by trying different tools and different methods and seeing what worked for me. And what worked for me meant something that I kept using. It may not be the most popular tool, it may not be the best tool, but I actually stuck to it. And so I would try out different things. You had mentioned before that you're going back to school. School for most people starts in August or September. You have a few months to play around with some tools and methods. So start playing around with some things for a week, 2 weeks, and see what you actually stick out and use, and that might be helpful. So another question here is what about scheduling self-time? Yes, I do schedule self-time. For me, when I'm at my best, and I do want to say this, that I don't do all of this all the time. It's evolving. I'm always working on it because sometimes I'm really good at this time management, other times I'm not. But when I'm really on top of it, I my non-negotiable is about an hour or two before I need to like go to work or get ready, and I also have time in the evening, and I do my morning routine and my evening routine. So that for me is my self-time. And self-time for me means that I get to meditate, I journal, and I move in some kind of way. And so self-time for you can mean whatever that means for you, whether that's exercising, listening to music, whatever it is. But I do recommend, at least during the day, whether it's in the morning or in the evening, scheduling that time. I do think in the morning it's great before you start looking on your phone, emailing for work, commuting to work, do something for yourself. Another thing I do, I follow the Artist Way method, which is morning pages. So I mentioned I do journal. But another method with the Artist Way is taking an artist date. And an artist date doesn't mean you have to be drawing or anything, but it means setting aside at least 2 hours in a week for yourself, where you take yourself on a date by yourself. And so I like to do that once a week. And for me, it doesn't always mean that I actually go out and go somewhere. Sometimes I'm in the house and I'm just doing art, or I'm watching a movie, or I read a book, go see an art exhibit, whatever it might be, but I just go somewhere by myself, maybe a walk in the park. So those are just some like thoughts I have and I wanted to share about time management. If they're not any